Okay, so I'm Kelly Walker.
I'm Moriah.
I'm Paxton.
I'm Katie.
I'm Laekan.
I'm Lauren.
And our project, we explored poverty as a whole and its impacts on development and also the family. So to start from the very beginning, we explored poverty's impacts on prenatal development and the risk factors that are involved with living in poverty. So as we know that people who tend to live in poverty tend to live in poorer areas, which are placed near kind of bad places in the environment, so there tends to be more air pollution. So what we have learned is that air pollution is linked to preterm birth and cognitive deficits, especially after the baby is born, and if you continue to be exposed to that, that can really impact the child's development. Also, health risks that are involved with prenatal development. Those who are impacted by poverty are more likely to be obese or have other health issues due to a poor diet and that lacks necessary nutrients. They are also more likely to not have access to quality health care. So poor nutrition has been linked to intrauterine birth restriction, which means that the baby essentially fails to grow to a normal birth weight during pregnancy and preterm birth, which goes hand in hand. You can go to the next slide. And also, poverty can present a lot of emotional stressors. People who live in poverty are more at risk to be exposed to domestic violence. Low-income women are often trapped in abusive situations by lack of financial resources, which can cause an immense amount of stress, and during pregnancy, stress isn't good whatsoever for the baby. And so for emotional stress outcomes, this can cause preterm birth, ADHD, cognitive delays, and anxiety and depression from the get-go. And also, people who live in poverty have a higher infant mortality rate. So the national infant mortality rate, or deaths of children under 1 year old for the U.S. is 6.1 deaths per live birth, and that is just involving in poverty. And to fix all of this, there's call for action, because what we have found is that when finding a solution to these problems, it is essentially a catch-22. So there's not really an answer to everything, because it's hard to find the right answer to remedy all of these problems. But in the articles that I researched and read, the call for action is for local physicians and medical care providers to make it their moral responsibility to take care of their communities in relation to poverty. And yeah, basically it.
Okay, so when it comes to the brain development of a child based on their interactions with poverty, there's many different pathways. It could be inadequate nutrition, substance abuse, maternal depression, exposure to the environmental toxins, trauma, abuse, and the quality of their daily care can all lead to harm to the early brain development. So what they have found in studies so far is that the children who have been in poverty have been used, they have a smaller brain surface area, they have a lower gray matter volume. So as you can see in the gray matter chart, over time it gets a larger gap as they grow up, and then the brain areas most affected is the frontal lobe and the temporal lobe with the hippocampus. And in the bottom left picture, you can see where the activity of the brain of a healthy brain is on the left. And then on the right, you can see how an abused brain, a child who's been through poverty, they have a lot less activity. And the gap between those two children can still be there, even at the age of 22.
So I researched poverty in parenting and poverty related to education. And so overall, poverty can lead to a lot of stress for caregivers, and they can experience emotional problems when living in poverty, which can interfere with how they interact with their child. Because low-income families oftentimes have a limited education, their language is dominated by commands and simple structure rather than explanations. They tend to use harsh parenting styles based on parental control rather than interactive styles, promoting emotional development and social competence. So their parenting style is more like demanding and unresponsive. And this just shows the poverty cycle. When a family lives in poverty, usually the child grows in poverty, and then there's significant disadvantage in education, and then they like struggle to get a job, and they fail to escape the poverty cycle. And poverty in education, low-income families usually do not have a high level of education, so therefore they do not provide a lot of academic resources for their children to read to them. Poverty can affect a child's development and school readiness. Being read to in the first few years of life contributes to the development of phonemic awareness and comprehension skills. Children from poor families are less likely to be read to than children from better off families. And in the United States, fewer than half of low-income preschoolers are read to on a daily basis, compared with 61% in families above the poverty line. So children do not typically have support from their parents on homework or projects assigned to them. And this is just a video I found about poverty in education.
She can watch it. Okay, so I did poverty around the world, and Africa is one of the top places in the world as far as poverty. And in 2007, 72 million children did not attend school in Africa, which is a lot, obviously. Work left 56 million children out of school, 54% of which were girls. So the kids in Africa who don't attend school go off to work, and in most places, the boys work while the girls stay home, which is where the 54% comes from. And then almost 12 million girls may never even enroll, and that's in the areas of Africa that had the greatest poverty rates. And then 74 million of the 132 million children who are primary school age are not enrolled in school. So Kenya's government, they also have about these numbers as far as primary schooling goes. So they introduced free primary education to families in poverty. And since then, the scores have improved anywhere from 30 to 50%, just depending on where in Kenya they're located.
That's okay.
So I was looking at poverty and nutrition. So first off, there is limited resources and lack of access to healthy, affordable foods. So whenever you're in poverty, you're most likely living in a neighborhood that is also impoverished or that doesn't have as much money. So there's lack of full-service grocery stores or farmers markets where you can get fresh, healthy foods. They're less likely to have and use their own vehicle for the regular food shopping, so families who are in poverty may not have access to a vehicle, and if they live in a rural area, they're not able to get to the grocery store because it could be like a 20-minute drive. Healthy food may be more expensive, so we've seen this with like fresh produce. It's more expensive than buying a box of something that's processed that's easily to make. Healthy food like fresh produce, they're poor quality at places in these areas because it's getting shipped in and it's not grown locally. And greater availability of fast food restaurants. So again, in these neighborhoods and these towns, there's McDonald's everywhere and Wendy's, and these families may see that it's easier to eat off the dollar menu than to go home and make food. So food deprivation and overeating is a big problem for these families as well. They'll overeat when food does become available, so if they get a box of food from a pantry, or if one of the parents in the home or one of the caregivers get a raise and they're able to go grocery shopping, they may overeat right after they do that. But then they'll restrict their food intake or sacrifice their own nutrition in order to make sure their children's fed. And so there's kind of the cycle of eating too much and then not eating at all. So that's a big issue with these families. And then there's also high levels of stress, anxiety, and depression. So they face poor mental health And also with these mothers in these families, they have maternal stress and depression, and their children may be obese from eating out so much, and it could cause them to be stressed about not being able to adequately care for their child in the nutrition aspect. And there's also hormonal and metabolic changes due to the unhealthy eating, so it can cause behavioral issues, and they're also not that active because there's not a lot of access to areas to play for the children, which we'll get to in a minute. And there's limited access to health care for these individuals. Most of them are also uninsured, so they're not able to get their basic health care to avoid some of these health problems due to their eating issues. Lastly, there's fewer opportunities for physical activity. So these children aren't able to really go play as much because there's not that many resources available. There aren't that many playgrounds. And there also is some crime and unsafe playground issues. So a lot of times in these areas, the playgrounds may not be really safe for the children. They may be old, outdated. These families are also less likely to have their kids participate in organized sports, which they could get some exercise from because it may cost money. And then since they're spending less time being active in school and stuff, and they're less likely to have recess, they're not getting really any physical activity in their day at all. So there's a little chart there of poverty, and then their unavailability of food, poor health services, and then that all leads to nutrition insecurity and nutrition issues. There's also a link to a TED Talk, which we won't watch right now, but it talks about how you should teach children about food early on so they can make better choices later on in life and how to help families in poverty.
Good. Local poverty. So I thought it was important to talk about local poverty because I think oftentimes people don't realize that there are people around them that are actually in poverty. So residents in Watauga County below the poverty level in 2016 was 31%. The statewide poverty level in 2016 was 20%. The percentage of children in Watauga County living in poverty is 19.2%. And the percentage of children in Watauga County living with food insecurity is 25%. So how can we help this issue? Watauga County has a health coalition, and 75% of the people that receive services from here are women, and 80% of those women have children. So as aspiring teachers or child care workers, it's important for us to be aware of these issues and aware of students going through these issues that are in our classrooms. That way we can be more helpful and understand those issues and how to be beneficial resources to those children. 40% of children in Watauga County qualify for free and reduced lunch. And what does this mean for future educators? Again, by understanding the different struggles that students in poverty face and their middle class to upper class peers is crucial. According to Eric Jensen, who studies children in poverty, there are 7 main differences in those children. And it's nutrition, their vocabulary, their effort, their growth mindset, their relationships, cognition, and distress. So children going through poverty, as we've already seen previously in the PowerPoint, have different nutritional nutrition. They have different nutrition. Their vocabulary is different, so they may come from families who use different language, and they might be seen by their peers as less smart when that might just be part of their culture at home. Their effort is oftentimes seen as being less, which really isn't true. They might just be going through things that are different that are going to affect their effort level. Their growth mindset. So these things really affect a child and oftentimes give them the idea that they can't get out of this cycle and that this is just where they are and life is going to be hard, whereas kids from families who have more money often have that growth mindset and they feel like they can do anything. Their relationships, so oftentimes they'll come from single parent homes or families where they aren't able to see their parents quite as often, and so they don't get necessarily the same resources that other children get. And they're going to go through different cognitive issues and stress.
And so, as our handout has, we have a list of resources that are found here in Watauga County. Also on our handout, we restate the statistics of local poverty. And so this is just a list of resources. So we have parent-to-parent family support network, the Children's Council, Oasis, Hunger and Health Coalition, the Hospitality House, and then the WAMY Community Action Incorporated. Check them out.